right. Hey, Tina. Hey, Rob. Federica. Bregan. To see you. All right. Stephanie's here. All right. Hope everyone's having a great morning. I am definitely getting a slow start today. I'm like, normally on these webinars, I'm ready to go, but this December has just been rough.
Crawling to the finish line.
Yeah. I was telling someone, they were like, how can I, or one of my colleagues, she's like, how can I help you finish the year? And I was like, you can drag me across the calendar date. But it's all good.
I don't think you're alone, Carrie.
No, I'm definitely not. Yeah. So welcome everybody. Yes, ready is very abstract for me right now, Stephanie says. I feel that. All right, lots of familiar names in the chat. Good to see you, Maddie. All right, Robert. Greetings from London. Yeah, where are people calling from? I'd love to know. I had some folks in Australia say that they were going to get up at 4 a.m. and I told them not to. Philly suburbs. Oh, hey, Marjorie. Barcelona, now Brazil. Oh my goodness. Lisbon. Oh, I hope it's a beautiful day in Lisbon, or evening, I guess. Seattle. I'm formerly from Seattle. All right. So we will get started here. We have a lot to cover today. We're going to be talking all about community careers, as you know, and the career outlook for this coming year. So I'm going to do a quick intro of everybody, and then we'll get started. So I'm going to share my screen quickly. All right. Okay, and I'm on the wrong slide. All right, so we're going to talk about stewarding your community career. And this is really thinking about next year. Of course, you could be working on this now if you want. And I hope that you do take away some actionable things to do right away if that's where you're at. But this is really geared toward hitting the ground running in 2022 and ending this year on a really positive and hopeful note. So for many of us, it's been a really, really wild year, especially for those of us who have been in the profession for several years. Just seeing the way that it has shifted and changed really, really quickly has been just wild to watch. And many signs are pointing toward things growing. And so that's obviously a good thing. But in order to move forward, it's important that we kind of take a look at the larger landscape, what's going on, so that we can see where our place is in all of that. So for those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Carrie Melissa Jones. I am a community strategist and coach, author, and I'm also a master's student and researcher of online communities. So really, I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of what I've seen really over the last 8 years of working as a consultant and advocate for community builders and how much that's shifted over the last year. And so that's the perspective that I'll be kind of sharing with you today. So that's my lane. And then we have some really interesting perspectives too from Jenn Walker-Wall, who you can see here in the video screen. Jenn is the founder and career coach for Work Wonders Careers. She's also a podcast host for the Making Life Work podcast. And she formerly worked in research, hiring, and career development at universities like MIT and Harvard University, as well as the Massachusetts General Hospital. Jenn, I discovered your work when you joined the Engage Your Online Community cohort, and I was just so blown away by all of the resources that you provide and all of your expertise. And I know a lot of community builders are questioning their careers right now. So I was like, let's do something together. So I'm so excited for all of you to meet Jenn and to learn from her today. You'll also be hearing from Alina Din. She is a community builder currently at Retool. She previously worked at Quora and Khan Academy. She's been building communities professionally for over 4 years. In addition to that, or before her community building career, she's also been a freelance writer, an Urdu teaching assistant. She's worked in student services administration. So really interesting background to have come to community from. And Alina will be talking you through this huge leap that she made in her career this year and kind of the thought process behind it, and then what that process was like and how she navigated this big change in her career from the community perspective. So today I'm going to walk you through really quickly just a career outlook at like the 50,000 foot level for the community career pathway. Then I'll hand it over to Alina, and then Jen will kind of walk us through how to actually put this all into action for you and your career. Also, before I get started, I want you to know I have the chat window open, and you're welcome to ask questions at any point during this. We can stop and interject with your questions. You don't need to hold them till the end. Although if you do have a question that you want answered at the end, feel free to put it into the Q&A section, not the chat section of the webinar here. That way I don't lose anything as I'm trying to moderate this. So that's just a note, and please do share and share your reflections as we go along. All right, so first things first, career outlook. So this is a tweet that I saw recently from Sarah Drinkwater, and she said that nearly every company she's been speaking to right now is hiring for community from early career to senior strategist. And she's a former worked within the venture capital space. I'm seeing this too, although what I'll say is that a lot of the roles that I'm seeing are tech roles, and they're not, I'm actually not seeing a lot of early career roles myself personally. Now, this also could be a function of the fact that people come to me when they need strategic help. So they're generally not yet equipped for early career, but even still, what I'm seeing is that they're wanting to bring people in who can tell them what right looks like, tell them what good looks like. And so for early career professionals, this is a tough time because they don't yet have that experience. So, thinking about how you can leverage your experience from past communities you've been part of, all that is really, really important here. And as Robert said, they say community and they often do mean social media manager or some variation thereof, or sometimes they mean moderator. And you have to be really clear about what you're looking for. This year, I've also seen a lot of chief community officer roles and director and up level roles opening up. So that's really hopeful. But again, it is concerning to me to see these fewer entry level roles because it's a problem for our pipeline as a profession. So people need mentors right now. So if you're in a place to mentor someone, this is also a great time to be thinking about that. Beyond this anecdotal evidence, I also took a look at over the last 10 plus years, what are people looking at on Google? How are people searching for the term online community manager? And this is similar, the trend is similar for the term community manager as well. It has gone up in a big way steadily over the last 10 plus years. I will say that it's gone up for the term community manager and online community manager, but it has gone down for the terms community and online community generally. There's probably a few reasons for that. There was a big hype cycle in the early 2000s around like everyone needs an online community that kind of died out. But what this is speaking to me is that there's more people looking into starting the profession and more people who are looking to hire. And again, like these are a lot of technology focused roles that I'm seeing out there today. Also to caveat this, things are different by region. So this is a Wall Street Journal piece that was published. This is from a Wall Street Journal piece that was published this week about how within different regions, there's different job posting volume per person. And so the Western and Eastern states, there's oftentimes fewer than one job per seeker, but in these other places, there are many, many more postings. And of course, many of us work remotely and our work can be done remotely. So this doesn't necessarily affect us. Although I've also seen some stories that have been talking about how Colorado and some changing legislation there about having to reveal salaries is affecting employees in Colorado and California as well. If you are a contractor, it's probably affecting you in some way with the need for contractor versus employee status. So I've also heard anecdotally many, many stories of discrimination against people at different age groups, because there is a popular conception, if you're a community manager, you are on the younger side because you know the internet. It's not true. And there's also, I've been hearing a lot of anecdotal evidence about discrimination against gender and ethnicity and all of these things that are an issue across industries, across sectors, all of that. And so if anyone in here is in the position of hiring anyone in the next year, I want you to think really, really hard about that, and really hard about how great community professionals are not necessarily people who look and act like you. And so I think that's really, really key, important to keep in mind if you are in a position of hiring in the next year. And also, if you're in the position of looking, know that you are not alone. Today, half of workers overall say they want a new job. This is US based. And 1 in 3 workers under the age of 40 are considering switching careers entirely. So if you've been questioning, know that about half of your colleagues have been doing the same thing. And so now is a great time in the community profession to, 1, seek a promotion, raise, or other compensation from your current employer if you're happy where you are at, because demand is so high. It's a great time to ask your employer to invest in your professional development as you level up. So whether that's leadership training, learning more about business skills, getting an MBA partially funded by your organization or fully funded, doing more strategy work or project management skills, whatever that might be, it's a great time to invest in yourself here. Also, it's a great time, and Alina will talk about this, to evaluate your satisfaction. Are you really happy where you're at? And Jen will talk about when to act on that question of, I'm not necessarily happy, so what do I do next? And it's also a great time to work with a career coach or recruiter before you are ready. And again, Jen will talk all about this. So I will hand it over to Alina now to share a little bit about her background and story looking for a job in community this last year.
Thanks, Carrie. Let me share my screen real quick to pull up my slides. Can everybody see? Yeah? Okay, great. And let me just pull up some notes from my end to look at. All right. So hi, everyone. My name is Alina, as Carrie mentioned, and I'm here to talk today about my reflections on my job hunt journey this past year. So you can find me on LinkedIn. This is the link to my LinkedIn and my email address. Yeah, if you want to reach out to me or connect, have any questions afterwards, more than happy to help out. So some background. So in March of 2021, I decided to look for a new role. There were some things that, as Carrie mentioned, that prompted me to just start looking elsewhere. I wasn't 100% satisfied. And so over the course of 5 months, I applied to over 250 jobs. I got around 40 callbacks. I think that is a 16% rate. I should have done the math. I don't know. I think it's that much. I made it to 9 final rounds. I got 4.5 offers. So I say 0.5 because I pulled out of the reference check part for one company because I decided to sign on with Retool. And I applied mostly, almost exclusively on LinkedIn, didn't write a single cover letter. And I focused on B2B tech companies. That's where I wanted to segue into. That's the industry that I wanted to go, from social media, internet into B2B. So yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that interview process. There were a lot of numbers I just threw out. And if I could sum it up in 3 words, it was intense. It involved a lot of reflection. And I really honed my skills in advocating for myself, which for me was the biggest win, even more than just like getting a job that I'm really happy with now. That skill was super useful. So I want to say intense because, I went through many applications, and that just, means like going through a lot of the same information that you repeat about yourself. There's like, I want to say for like, if I've applied to 5 roles, 4 of them is going to be like this form rejection that you get maybe, within a day. And then, even if you do get a call back, you might go through a very lengthy interview process. You might have to do, an exercise or 2. Startups really, I noticed a focus on that. They want you to do like a take home. And then you get rejected at the end with little to no feedback. So, things like this can really weigh you down, especially if you've got your heart set on one company. You start to fall in love with the team, or you're thinking like, oh, I think I could be really happy here. And then, you just, the process just abruptly ends, and they tell you that they're not going to move on. So, but, just know that this process is flawed. recruiters and hiring managers are judging you based off of very limited information, their own moods, and things outside of their control. So I took it personally when I felt like I did really well, but now that I look back on it, I hardly remember any of it. So it was intense in that sense. The reflection part is like, so the questions that they'll ask, like, tell me about yourself, or why are you applying for a new role? What do you want from your next role? What motivates you, in your job search? Like these things really make you think. And what I did is I knew they were going to come my way, so I just jotted these things down in a journal, and I kept each answer to 3 or 4 bullet points so that I could answer them when those questions come up. And then as I went through so many interviews, like it just got easier and easier, and it almost became second nature. And then the most important part about advocating for myself. So, it's important to keep in mind that you want to balance showing yourself as an enthusiastic and an excited potential employee, but you want to keep your own needs in mind too. So I had specific things that I knew that I needed from my next role, a specific salary. I couldn't travel or commute very far. And I definitely didn't want to do anything, related to content moderation. So I kept these in the back of my head, and if asked, I stated these preferences. But if some jobs required this, literally, I would just like move on. I would, if it made sense to continue the interview process, like for whatever reason, I would. But I was just like, okay, this is a lower priority. I'm going to focus on other jobs that I have, that I'm like companies that I'm talking to. So it was hard. It was painful. It took a great deal of discipline. And up until I finally found the role that I wanted, I questioned if I was even doing the right thing. But in the back in the back of my head, I knew I was qualified and I had a lot to offer. And this really helped keep me going and helped me stay motivated. So then the next slide is guiding questions that I had. This kind of just like helped me just helped me guide myself through that process and really like pick and choose, okay, what's important for me. So things that I kept, the things that I kept like top of mind as I did my job search was, how would I feel at the end of the day if I did this job? These are actually questions that I asked myself as I started to look for a new job and, realized I wanted to start applying. So how do I feel at the end of the day? For me, a big thing is, as a community manager, have I helped users/customers get unblocked? Am I making an impact to my team and company? Impact is very important to me. Do I even like my team? Do I feel supported? Right. And so whenever people are like, do you have any questions for us at the end of the interview process? I really wanted to ask hiring managers about their management style, how they gave feedback, how they grew their employees. I really wanted to know this information. And then finally, am I getting compensated fairly according to my skills, my experiences, my education, and where I live? So that was very, very, very important. And I'm glad I kept that in mind. It was super helpful.
Alina, if I can just jump in there really quick.
Yeah.
I was just going to say to that last point about compensating fairly. I know you shared with me that you've seen this too. I've also seen that salaries are rising sharply over the last year or so because of demand and such a low supply of people who are really great at this work, which all of you are if you're here right now. And so in the past, I saw salaries ranging from, 30 even sometimes to like 120K for anywhere from entry level to mid level. And now things are I'm seeing a lot more in the range of like 150 to 180 for these roles. And of course, that's often dependent on your location and all of that. But it's a great time to ask for a raise to bring yourself up in alignment with what people are now making in the market now too. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. If surprisingly, like when I looked up salary on Glassdoor and some of those websites, it was on the lower end. So I was just like, this feels low, and I just went higher arbitrarily because I felt like what I'm making now, it should be a little bit more than that. And it did work out in my favor. I mean, it's a tricky thing. I guess maybe Jen will talk about it later. Like I could go on and on about salary. Maybe you could have like a separate session about it altogether. But there's a lot of things that go into it. I will just say, know your worth and talk to as many people as you can to make sure that you're throwing out the right numbers. So yeah. So the learnings that I got out of my whole process, you know, you owned your narrative. I owned my narrative. And inevitably, I got questions around like, why are you looking, or why do you want to switch? Why, you know, why did you leave? And definitely you want to talk about why you're running toward your next role, not why, you know, one is like running away from something. So I focused on why I learned and why it's motivating me to switch roles, what I'm really interested in, what I'm very passionate about. And so that's how I owned the narrative, right? That's how I crafted my own brand when I talk to potential employers. It's already been mentioned, but the community job market is so hot right now. There's so many roles. When I was looking in 2019, there were just a handful that sprung up. And then this time around, there were just so many I couldn't even keep up. And I was really able to pick and choose like, oh, okay, this looks cool. Let me apply. This one, not so much, right? So definitely works in your favor as a job seeker. And that was great. Being yourself pays off. So heard that my whole life, right? Just be yourself, just be yourself. And some companies won't like it. You know, in the form of the rejection, or maybe, you know, I might have, at one point I might have come off as like just too much, because, you know, I am who I am. And that's okay. For me, even at that point, I accepted it and I was cool with it, because I knew that it would only get me closer to the companies that would like me exactly as I am. And then lastly, I kind of learned this the hard way, but I'm glad I caught it in time. Really prioritize your mental health, exercise, eat healthy, sleep well, lean into your support group, right? So I don't know if I already mentioned this, but when I started looking for the job, I was, so I spent 5 months on this search. 3 months out of that, I wasn't working. So this really was my full-time job, just applying to a lot of roles and getting interviews and this kind of a thing. And it's very easy to get burnt out, because, you know, people want to move quickly. They want to flip your calendar. And I would actually like kind of space it out and push back and say like, no, I need to do it the following week. And they were understanding. Obviously, nobody asks why. So you just like kind of put up your boundaries in that sense. But it's so important to lean into your support group. And for me, my family, my spouse, like these were the people who helped keep me going, especially when I got rejected and I felt down. They were the ones who were like, no, it's going to be fine. You're fine. You know, you're great. Don't worry. So whatever support group, you know, if it's friends or family or your dog, my dog is helpful for me too, like lean into that. And then, yeah, I think that was my final slide. I'm sorry if I went over 8 minutes, Carrie.
Oh, you're good.
That's it.
Yeah, such good advice. I think the other thing that I want to point out here is just this wisdom about being yourself paying off is so critical. I hear a lot of people say, I think I have to kind of dampen who I am, too much or not enough. And obviously that's all stuff that like we all face, and we like, I personally face in therapy and all of that.
Sure,
No one needs to know about that. But but at the end of the day, you're going to want to find a place where you can really be yourself. So I will hand it over now to Jenn to walk us through what to do at this point.
Awesome. Sure I can see the chat. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me, Carrie, and thanks everyone for being here. I know it's been a long year, a long couple of years, so I'm so grateful for your presence today. And it's taking all I have to not just ask Alina like a million questions about her job search process, because I'm extremely nosy about this. And so I think it's so hard to get a good glimpse into the black box of other people's job searches. And we make a lot of assumptions about what other people's experience on the job market is like. And we tend to think it's way easier for everyone else. So I'm always so grateful when people share their really candid experience. So hopefully we can have time to debrief on that a little bit more. So I am going to chat about the like nitty gritty in the weeds, kind of how to operationalize a change in your career in the year to come. So like Carrie said, my name is Jenn Walker-Wall. I'm a career strategist and founder at Work Wonders Careers, and we help mission-driven professionals land new jobs and thrive at work. Prior to launching Work Wonders over 7 years ago, I worked in hiring and academia for many years. And so I witnessed firsthand hundreds, probably thousands of people go through the hiring process, all the way from applying as applicants to being a finalist. And so when I started Work Wonders, it was really about leveraging that insider knowledge and to paint a clearer picture for people in terms of what happens when you hit submit on your resume. I'm going to kind of default to talking about job seekers here, but I want you to know that this process that I'm going to share is actually really helpful if you are trying to make moves internally. So if you want to position yourself for a raise or a promotion, a lot of this will still be very helpful for you. So feel free, if you need me to go deeper in that direction, post a question in the chat. I'm happy to go into more details. In the meantime, I'm happy to have you connect with me. I'm mostly like over on LinkedIn. So happy to connect with you over there under Jenn Walker-Wall. I'm occasionally on Instagram and even more occasionally over on TikTok, but every once in a while, I just can't help myself and find a lip sync thing that I absolutely have to do. So I'd love to connect with you there, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but let's just dive kind of right into things. Here's what I'm assuming about the people in the room, so to speak. And I'd love to hear in the chat, like which one of these might be you. I'm assuming there are job seekers here or potential very passive job seekers in the room. I'm assuming there's people maybe who are new to thinking about community careers and are kind of exploring what's possible. There are people who are looking to move up. And there are people who are just feeling very stuck and overwhelmed. And oftentimes when I, give a workshop, there's a really healthy combination of people experiencing more than one of these. So if that's you, if you check a couple of these boxes, you're in the right place. And if you check any of these boxes, we're going to help you think through some actionable steps that you can take here. So you see Frederica seeking advancement in the middle of a reorg. Ooh, very tricky. Okay, good. We'll talk about that. So here's what I want to offer today. I want to talk about what I think really holds people back, where people get stuck and sort of caught in some of these like pitfalls of the career process. Because in addition to having worked in hiring and HR, I've now spent 7 years watching hundreds of people go through this process. And so there are some very common themes where people really do get stuck and held back. So I want to talk about what they are and how to move through them. I also want to offer some simple exercises and action steps to help you think through your next steps strategically. A lot of times, especially if we're unhappy in a role, we are trying to look for an eject button. And so as often as possible, I really want to help. Instead of an eject button, I prefer a pause button. So we'll talk a little bit about what the options are there. We're not going to do any 5 or 10-year career mapping. Okay, anyone who is predicting the future that far out, my hat is off to them, but I really want to just give you a plan into the new year to see a few steps ahead at a time, because I actually think that's all you need. And I'll use our career framework process to help you generate next steps. They won't be the same for everyone. So I really want you to kind of tune in to like what you need to know about yourself, what you need to do next, because everyone here could leave with a very different looking roadmap. And I also just want to remind you of some of the resources. Alina did a really good job not leaving dogs off the list, right? Of all the resources you can access for support as part of this process, we're keeping pets in there. Sometimes we just need everything we can get. So we're going to talk about that too. So let me just start with what I consider some myths. Like these do not feel like representative experiences, representative truths for my clients, but they're feelings that many people come into this process with, which is that landing a new job or having a great career is easy for everyone but you. When we log into LinkedIn, we see people's new jobs, but we really don't see too much of like, I didn't get the job, or this was hard, or I'm struggling, right? And so I just want you to know that I have a good window into that for people who are talented and skilled and in-demand professionals, quite frankly. So a lot of people doubt themselves. This process is just riddled with opportunity for self-doubt. And if you're experiencing that, you're in great company. A lot of people think you have to have a great, well-connected network to get anywhere. Our job search clients often get traction applying cold online. However, I'm here. I'm a fan of Carrie's. I'm here because I think connection and community and relationships are critically important. So I want to talk about how you can use both today to move things forward for you. A lot of people think they've come too far in their career to make a change. They're too seasoned. They might lose seniority or something like that. That's an assumption I think we can revisit. People think they should accept the first offer that comes along. A lot of boomer parents love to give this advice. So this is something that I hear a lot from like millennial and Gen Z clients, that they just have to say yes. You don't have to say yes. We'll go into more detail there. You need to apply to as many jobs as possible to generate traction. I super admire the effort Alina put into over 200 applications, but I was telling Carrie and Alina before we got started today that most of our clients who work full-time, we aim for 4 to 8 quality applications. So we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that. And another very pervasive myth that generally holds people back from doing just about anything is that you need to be perfectly clear about what you're doing to get started. So here are some additional realities that I think are really important for thoughtful professionals to sit with here. Growth doesn't always mean up. I just had a conversation with a new client who was describing to me what she thought of as a lateral move. So what that meant is a much better work environment for the same pay and title. And I really just want to like hold for a minute that we call something with the same pay and the same salary or the same title, but a much better work environment, a lateral move. I don't think of that as a lateral move. That sounds like a potentially healthy move. And so this sort of like obsession with going up and not appearing to take any steps back or to make any, sideways moves, I think can really get in the way of us making some healthy decisions for ourselves. Curiosity beats clarity any day of the week. When people tell me they're just not clear enough to get started in either pursuing a promotion or starting a job search, what I hear is that they're not certain enough. And certainty is not something we're really looking to cultivate. So we really kind of want to nurture the curiosity and turn things into questions when we can. We'll talk about how to do that. You also don't need to have a long-term step-by-step plan here. It can be very tempting and comforting to have that. And we do have we have a milestone guide that we use with our clients. But I really want you to think about this as like this is a process that will emerge over time. If there's an emergent element, right? You will do your due diligence to get clear on what you have to offer and to convey that strategically and to do so consistently. And then we really have to be a little responsive to what comes our way in terms of interviews and phone screens and all of that. So a few steps at a time, we'll get the job done. A universal truth about job seeking is that it takes longer than anyone wants it to. Any time at all spent in a job search process is time people would hands down spend somewhere else. But it doesn't mean that you're failing. And I'm happy to talk about sort of what I'm seeing in terms of time, because there's a huge discrepancy. Some people are having very, very fast job searches, and some industries are moving at a total snail's pace. So we can talk about that too. There's also a ton of repetition, right? A ton of repetition in the job search process. So that can have people feeling like they are spinning their wheels, and it doesn't always mean that. So these are some areas where I'll address in more detail, and I'm happy to field some questions. But let's talk about the biggest mistake that holds people back, and that is waiting too long to start. This is my favorite chart, my favorite graphic, right? We have this little, let's take in the temperature, so to speak, on how we feel about our current work opportunity. And so I've kind of divided the work experience into 4 general areas of experience. This is where people usually come and see me, right? So the get me out of here, hit the eject button, I can't possibly, show up at work anymore. And I really want to encourage you to think about starting the process closer to over here, closer to where you're not feeling burned out, where there's still some momentum, where you're still feeling excited. And it's just so hard, I think, to carve out the time to do that when you're feeling like you're happy and satisfied. And so the people who come to me over here, where they've seen enough red flags to know that they're reaching burnout, or maybe they're not going to get the promotion in the time frame they wanted, they tend to have the shortest processes. The people who wait the longest in the get me out of here phase, who are like most resistant to starting or starting strategically, tend to have the longest, most drawn out processes. And that's because like burnout and exhaustion is really hard to combat, right? We've added kind of like another obstacle on top of just managing a job search, which is enough. So if you're here today and you're like, I'm not ready to job search, I am enjoying my job and I still see potential here, there's still a lot of things that you you can do in terms of making sure just that you're prepared and ready and chipping away at some of that job search to-do list while you're still happy and showing up at work and have energy once you leave. So there's no such thing as a strategic move without a good dose of self-reflection and assessment. So we want to, yes, it's okay if you're there too. Most people are there, so that's the normal. But I think if you ask the clients who've come through our program and worked with us, they tend to be much more proactive, passive job seekers in the future. It's one of the kind of, I think, larger takeaways from managing the job search process is you only want one long, drawn out, challenging job search, and then you tend to do things a little differently. So let's talk about how to generate some of this clarity and also to start thinking about how to effectively convey your value. So the way we do this in kind of 3 different ways: reflect, review, and document. So this is an internal process. So many people skip right to their resume or right to their LinkedIn profile. And before we do that, those are both important pieces. We really need to kind of get clear on who we are and what we offer. Like we just heard Carrie and Alina say how important it is to be yourself. And some of us really need to tap into that, right? And figure out who that is, what that looks like. Maybe we've been showing up at work as a version of ourselves that doesn't really resonate, or we're in a place where it's not safe at all to be ourselves. So I really want to encourage you to have some time to respond to reflection prompts, exercises, and have conversations with trusted peers and colleagues to really start thinking about your journey, your learnings, your priorities here, like what feels important going forward. Another way to kind of do this is to start looking at active job postings in your areas of interest and using that as sort of a way to reflect back what your emerging patterns or themes and interests are in potential future jobs. So it's kind of a way to use these as reflection points for yourself, these active job postings. And writing is so important. So when I'm teaching a sociology class, which is a part-time job I have on the side, I know students think we assign papers just because it's for the fun of it, but writing is a pedagogical tool. It's a way that people learn, and it is just as effective in a college learning context as it is in this context. This is where we take credit for work where no one is giving us credit. It's where we acknowledge work that work has not been acknowledged. It's where we really document what is true and important to us. And so I really want to urge you to take the time to write it. Don't keep it all up in here, because what happens in here fluctuates from day to day. What happens on paper is something we can refer back to. And I think that makes it a little bit more consistent in the process. Here are some sample prompts, and then I see some questions that I guess the question, are we saving the Q&A, Carrie, for the official Q&A?
Yeah, I was just we can do some at the end. There's some that I want to answer at the end, but there was one that I wanted to ask that was specifically about that area. Number 1, snaps to the writing thing. I never really thought about it like that. And it's so true. You get to just like take the space you need when you do that. But one question from Maddie is, do you think about job searching differently from a place of unemployment versus when you already have a job? And if so, do you have specific advice for those who are searching while unemployed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I don't generally think about it differently. And there's, I guess the caveat is there a significant gap on your resume? Sometimes that can impact your experience as a job seeker, not just any gap. I'm talking like if you have years and years and years and years of work experience and a couple months of a gap, I don't consider that to be a huge issue. Some people have months and they only have a couple years of work experience. So I would think about whether there's a gap there. And I would also resist the urge to turn your job search into a full-time job by applying all over the place. Again, Carrie and Alina and I were chatting. I tend to not think that there's 40 hours of quality jobs to apply to every week. So you might need to evaluate for yourself, like, do I want to get some practice by putting some additional applications out there? Is it a better use of your time to, try and maintain connections and relationships? Because that's something that folks who are unemployed or just have had a break from full-time work experience sometimes lose access to that network, which can be so valuable in so many ways. So that's kind of how I think about unemployment. A lot of people are going to have gaps and periods of unemployment. So I don't think they're inherently unavoidable, actually, is what I think for most of us. So I think in that sense, they're normal. And you may have the capacity to apply for more than what our full-time working clients are able to, but by no means would I necessarily say 40 hours a week of applications is what you should aim for. Let me know if there's any follow-up there. Yeah, sure, Maddie, good question. So here are just a few sample prompts. Like if this was the only reflection you did, I think it would put you in pretty good shape. And my favorite question here, I think I'm supposed to build anticipation for my favorite question, but I'm a fire sign, so like I can't do that. I just have to lead with it. What are you most proud of? This generates the best content for resumes and cover letters and LinkedIn profiles. So I really want you to think about what it is that you are most proud of. And a lot of times it's the way you've responded, how you've showed up for people. It doesn't have to be tied to a business metric. Remember, this is for you. What do you want more of and what do you want less of? It's easy to just think you need a total career 180. What most people need is to be better compensated for their work and in a healthier team environment. People could definitely do less career transitions if they could find this in their field. So I try to pay attention to that as well. And what kind of environment or culture, where do you do your best work? Like, what are the resources you need? So many people feel like they don't have outcomes or metrics that they can showcase. And a lot of times it's because there's a lack of investment in actually measuring anything in the workplace. It's pretty normal that people say this to me. Okay, so ultimately the pause button here, rather than the, get me out of here, I'll do anything, is really to make sure that we make sure your next move is the right move for you, and to give you some space to really think about what you need. It's going to make communicating your goals that much easier in the interview process. It's going to leave you, as we'll see in the next step, with much easier content to write in terms of resumes and cover letters and all of that. So give yourself some time to kind of paint this picture. It doesn't have to be perfectly clear, but it shouldn't be a blank space either. Yes, we all have to keep file of all the nice things people say about us. I agree. And I also just want to say, like, people don't send enough of those emails. So maybe after you do something you're proud of or that feels good, send yourself a little email, because, I've been in plenty of workplaces where I haven't seen people get credit for their work. So take it. The next step is about revising. So it's about taking this reflection and turning it into something that is actually intended for other people to see. So this could look like resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, even things like interview content, I think can be helpful. Yes, Robert, and give it to other people. That's so true. So I'm going to just do a quick couple of minutes on how we think about customizing resumes for job, just in case that's of interest to people. But also I'm just trying to kind of get through this content in the time that we have. So feel free to drop questions. We can come back to this in the Q&A if it's helpful. I want you to, when you're applying for jobs, whether it's internal or external, to really pay attention to what they are asking for in the qualifications section. Obviously, you want to use the description and the responsibilities to assess for yourself if it feels like something you're excited or interested in. But a lot of recruiters are making decisions based on your qualifications. Instead of assuming that you are unqualified, which people do all the time, I want you to ask yourself, how am I qualified for this role? How do I have experience that meets these qualifications? I once had a client tell me that they wanted to apply for a role but didn't have this master's degree in science that they were looking for, and this person was a medical doctor, like a physician with an MD. And I said, you know what, we're gonna go ahead and assume that counts for a master's degree in science. So everyone has a lot more experience here, and even if it's just a fraction of what they're asking for, being able to offer it and respond to it will elevate your application, and it'll show you're tuning into what other people are looking for, rather than asking people to extrapolate in your resume, which most recruiters do not have the capacity to do. And then, very controversial take here, we're going to write your resume like a human is going to read it, not like there's some bot behind the system. And this is always a place where I get a ton of questions, but having used applicant tracking systems, I reviewed and rejected people on my own, and there weren't any secret bots doing work for me. And quite frankly, the idea of such things brings up such compliance issues that I will break out in hives if I think about it too long. So we're going to write not full of keywords, but being responsive and like a human is reading it. So when you see a really long list of qualifications for a job, we use something called a summary of qualifications, which is 3 to 5 bullet points that breaks down your experience in regard to the qualifications. So I want you to think of those qualifications as like a cookie cutter. I just had my nieces over for Christmas cookie cutting, right? And so, you have all that extra dough, that's the rest of you, and we're kind of paring it back because we're serving to them like a very fine, highly customized dinner. This will save you a lot of work from having to customize other parts of your resume, and it'll allow you to check those boxes very, very quickly. Thank you, Carrie. They ate all the dough. So this was like, just didn't work out so great. They're only 5. So they basically ate anything that wasn't in the cookie cutter. So, and we can repurpose your experience for other jobs. Like this allows you to really take ownership over the narrative, which Alina mentioned, and really showcase what it is that you want people to see, which is what they're looking for. Like I said, people that we work with get traction online. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I worked in hiring and saw like what it took to get traction in this way. So I want you to use the right language. Think less about keywords and more about how can I signal to these people that I'm understanding what they're asking for to execute this role and that I've done that. I want you to manage your expectations. Nobody gets out of this process without a little bit of rejection or ghosting. So that is part and parcel. And I want you to spend, 6 to 8 weeks consistently putting out applications before you wonder where your phone call is, where your phone screen is. We don't assess hours after hitting submit. Focus on fewer and better applications. Practice, practice, practice. If you are someone who is like not ready to accept a job, it's not too early to see how your resume might generate opportunities for you or not. So having some practice applications, some low stakes jobs that are compelling, but you're not necessarily like a 10 out of 10, that's where we have some clients start, just so that they can master some of the strategy before needing it for a job they're super psyched on. And remember that, your reflection work is here to serve as the basis for a lot of strategic communication we'll do here on out. So even if you are someone who's doing freelancing or, looking to move internally or advance internally, all of this work can really help you position and angle yourself for what it is you're looking for. Yes, we love low stakes applications. There's too many high stakes over here. So we like to lower the bar as often as possible. So let me just offer some quick suggestions on how you can take action and start breaking this down. I want you to really streamline and get clear on your to-do list, because work on resume is not an actionable item. So I want you to say, make sure my resume is up to date. Practice using the summary of qualification strategy on my resume. Proofread my resume for typos. Those are things that you can actually do and cross off. And so I encourage you to kind of think of your actions as clear and concise as possible. We're a big fan of timers over here. So 20 minutes here and there is enough to move your job search forward, especially if you are not carving out any time for it. I work with a lot of people who are very ambitious, and sometimes 20 minutes feels like not enough. 20 minutes twice a week, 3 times a week, 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row is in fact enough time to move things forward. So bank on the consistency there. And I also want you to create flexible goals for each week. It's easy to feel derailed because you never know when work is going to pick up or your kid's going to get sick. And so what I like to have clients do when they can see their week kind of going off the rails is to like make a plan to come back to the work when they need to change priorities for good reasons. There's also a ton of fears here. I could give a whole workshop on fears. We spend months working with people on their fears in the process. So by no means do I think a bullet point and a slide is properly addressing what happens here. But I do think it's really helpful to like acknowledge what the fears are. And some of the ones I hear, I'm afraid of being rejected. I'm afraid of being ghosted. I'm afraid I'm never going to land a job. I'm afraid I'll land a job I'll hate more than this one. These are things I hear all the time. And so sometimes writing them down or sharing them with a friend or sharing them with a mentor can really just help kind of offload it. You are in the driver's seat in this process. You are deciding what jobs you apply for, what jobs you interview for, and what jobs you accept. So I really want you to think about, like, if you start to see red flags or yellow flags, like, you can ask, you can inquire, you can withdraw. You have tons of autonomy in this process. I also want you to set yourself up for interaction. If your job search is in your head, if you want a new job and you're going on to LinkedIn and you're scrolling through tons of jobs, but you're not setting yourself up for interaction by applying so that you might interview, for example, or reaching out to someone who works at that company and asking for an informational interview, you have a job browse and not a job search. So I really want you to think about that. We need to engage with other people and set ourselves up for that engagement in order to get traction here. Yes. Yes, therapy, big fan. Big fan personally and for the people around me. It's a good thing. And again, we're focusing on consistency here. So it doesn't have to be a done in a day job search. That's really not how this works. Small windows over time is a good place to be. And here's just a quick graphic. I'm actually going to just kind of skip over some of that so I can keep going through the content. I know I don't need to do a hard sell on the benefit of relationships in a group of community professionals here, but just some ways, and I think Alina named this quite well. You know, the connection here is not about having someone hand you a job, right? It's not about that transaction. And so many people think that's what good networking is. It's actually pretty rare that someone in your network will happen to have a great opportunity for you at the exact moment that you happen to want one. So that's like the stars aligning. When this really kicks in for people is when people can share information about companies and opportunities with you, and then you can decide, like, is this something I want to put myself forward for? Your network can broker introductions that can put you in front of hiring stakeholders, which can be super useful. And when you invest in these relationships for the sake of the relationship itself, then you will cultivate those kind of stars aligned moments where your network will bring work to you. But it isn't the fastest way to just start meeting people and hoping they have a job. I think there's just enough success stories of it happening out there for us all to believe that this is how people land jobs. But actually your resume and your networking strategy go hand in hand. For many companies, they are required to have you go through the application process for compliance reasons. And so I always say, don't give up on your resume just because you have great relationships. Like, put them together in tandem, make your connections job easy by having that resume that really speaks to your relevant abilities here. Again, not a hard sell for people in this group, right? But in the last couple of years, especially, we've had people, you know, balance disaster after disaster on top of their job search, on top of their family life. And so I think my real pitch for having a strategic job search is that, so there's time for your life to happen in the meantime, that when we do things in a purposeful, intentional, measured way, that you can actually have a life. You can engage in your community work, whatever that might look like for you. Quite frankly, I don't want to dissuade people from giving up some of their critical justice work in order to job search. All of us are learning to really integrate a lot of critical community work with the rest of our lives. And so I think for that reason, you know, this is a great way for people who have many interests and many people in their life and issues that they care about to not have to rearrange their whole life around a job search. One last note, and then we can switch to questions here. I think it's really critical that you track some of what you're doing, track your outcomes. Even if you're very exploratory and just having conversations with people, track what you're learning, track who you're speaking to. That way, when you talk to someone like me, like, I can help you assess what's going on and what you might need to do next. We love tracking on spreadsheets, but if you're more of a journaler, journal, whatever your natural inclination is to documentation, feel free to use that here. And remember that we can't iterate or improve our strategy or, you know, fine tune anything if we don't start. So one of the things we have some clients do when they're really struggling to start is to set a goal to get 10 rejections. And it's actually very hard to get 10 rejections without sort of generating something else that might be of interest and feel positive. So if rejection feels like your worst enemy, flip it on your head and make it your goal and see what happens for you. I'm happy to answer some questions. That was like the fastest I've gone through that content. So I hope that was good.
Amazing. There's some really good questions. I know Fabrizio had asked one and he had to jump out, but I think it's a good question to ask, building on Alina's experience and what you shared with Maddie. His question was, you know, that he's thinking about quitting and looking for a new job, but literally everyone has suggested the opposite. And so he's wondering what your take is on this. Is that a myth?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. Do I think it's easier to land a job while you have a job? I do tend to see that pattern, that the people who are currently unemployed do tend to have a little bit longer of a job search. That's a generalization, but I think it's probably fair to say that. That said, people are quitting their jobs, they're walking out, and they're figuring it out more than ever. So I think you really need to think about, like, what kind of position are you in to make a decision like this? Does it put such a stress on you that you may need to say yes to things that you may not want to, because that's something that's a possibility. If you have plenty of savings, then you feel, or you've got a partner and you can make that work, then by all means, who am I to keep you in a terrible job? I guess you got to kind of think about what your own situation is. But if you're miserable and unhappy, I do think it's not worth staying to make your resume look good. I don't tend to encourage decisions that make your resume look good if they make your life bad. So I would keep that in mind. And I will also say that when people start doing this, it makes them less resentful of even really terrible jobs, right? Like, I think so much of what we experience when we're unhappy at a job is that it drains us of our ability to kind of do anything about getting out of there. And when we start honoring that, there is less resentment. It's not permanent for most people, but it can sometimes give you a little bit of breathing room there.
Really good. I don't know if you have any further insight on that, Alina. I know this kind
Well,
of
I mean,
experience.
when I was looking, I was unemployed. So I'm living proof that you can make it out and you can still be picky and it can work in your favor. And I was honest. I mean, I think what I learned is that don't be too honest. I'm like, I wear my heart on my sleeve, but I really tried to just, like, honor myself and be honest in the sense that this is where I'm coming from. And this was, this is the situation, but always make it positive. This is what I'm running towards. This is what I'm really excited to dive into. And this is why my experience positions me for that. Yeah.
So it's possible to do both.
Sure.
Yeah. And maybe you're applying for a while you have the job, and then you're like, I just can't do this anymore. I can see that. I've done that before. Another really good question here from Robert is, how would you approach drafting a cover letter when you're applying to a role that is below your previous level or pay because you're looking to gain experience? But he's worried about appearing overqualified and risking rejection. So how would you approach the cover letter in that case?
Yeah, it's such a tricky dance for some clients to not look over or underqualified. So a couple of things that I would do is actually in your resume, if you can avoid referencing your explicit total years of experience, I think that's one place I remove it so it doesn't flag for the recruiter that just, like, this person's overqualified. And then I would say, right in the introductory paragraph, I'm looking to make a transition that will allow me to name something relevant that you can offer, right, that they're asking for, so that I can make a transition and gain experience, and then what you'll gain new experience doing. A mistake that some people make is that their enthusiasm for the change overrides their understanding of what people need out of them in the process. So no one's going to hire you because they're excited about your career change. So I want you to just keep it in mind to figure out what you can offer from those qualifications that are going to be helpful for the potential employer.
That's really helpful. A question here from Teeny. What are your tips for salary negotiation for entry-level folks? And I know, Alina, you had some thoughts on this too. So I want to make sure you could both share the answer to this one.
Yeah, do you want to go first, Jen, or should
Go
I
ahead.
take it? Okay. So entry level is a little bit harder, right? Because you don't have much experience to go off of. But that being said, knowledge is power. And the more you can just go in to that conversation armed with the data about, like, this is what the market is paying for this particular role and the responsibilities, that's helpful. And then also, I mean, obviously you must have, like, some experience, even if it's volunteer or an internship, and then your own education. So just kind of, like, take all those things into consideration, talk to people. I mean, I know it's a little bit tricky to just, like, go up to your friend or even your network and say, like, how much do you make? But some people are willing to share that when it comes up in the right way. So if you can just have, like, actual information about what the role pays or what similar roles pay, I think that's going to really help with negotiation.
I have an extremely unromantic take on salary negotiation because I worked in HR. So I love, like, the pep talk around encouraging people to negotiate, and I'm here for it because quite frankly, they're going to expect you to negotiate and they're going to offer you something that reflects that. So if you don't negotiate, you're often just leaving money on the table. So I would normalize negotiation, know that they're probably offering you something and there's room there. I would also, oops, I think the question disappeared. I think I would not assume that just because you're junior, you can't negotiate. I just don't assume that that's the case at all. Places do have budgets. So, they'll often ask you what your salary expectations are. And I like to say, I'm looking at roles that are between X and Y. What's the budget for this position? And then I pause and let them answer. So they should be forthright with you on that too from the get-go.
I have a friend who says that she does the pause too, that just to like not talk over herself, and she spells her name in her head while she's
yeah, they're not expecting you to ask back, and that surprises me as an HR person. But like also, I just think you need to make those decisions for yourself. Is this going to meet your financial needs?
Yeah. All right, let's see. This is a question specifically about community. So Tim asked, my community experience is narrow in scope around support forums, but I have over 4 years of experience there. Is it possible to apply to non-support, non-forum community roles, and how? So number one, I would say, yes, absolutely. This is just like any role where you can apply transferable skills. And I know lots of people who transition from moderator roles into, moving on to more strategic roles on their teams. And so really focusing on those transferable skills of communication, relationship building. You probably know a lot about different tech platforms if you've worked within support forums. And so that's often a need that teams have, is someone who really gets the tech or can learn it really quickly. So those are some skills to be thinking about. I don't know if you two have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, and that's my job experience. My first role at Khan Academy was support forums, training moderators, and then I went on to community management at Quora. So, and then Carrie, you just mentioned like you moved from a specific part of community management to more strategic, and then that's what I'm doing at Retool now. So it's totally possible. It's you described my experience right there, Tim. So you'll be fine.
I would also just offer to look for roles where there's a good like Venn diagram of like what you'd like to do that's new and what you can offer that is consistent with their needs. I think we tend to think that there's like a lot of black and white when we're trying to make a transition, and there's a lot of opportunities where there's like some gray area there that you could be a really strong candidate for and get what you want and feel like you're adding a lot of value right away as well.
Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of gray area with anything within support to other community roles. All right, so it's 11:02. I want to make sure that we respect everyone's time. We can probably answer these other 2 questions. I can answer them over email. Make sure to check out Jen. Her accelerator is starting up again on January 12th that she has listed here. You can find out more at workwonderscareers.com. And thank you so much to both of you for sharing your experience and your expertise. I know I appreciate it. I am sure that everyone else here really appreciates it as we're thinking about what the heck is going to happen next year. so much. And thank you everyone who is here in the chat for your presence and for all the work that you do every day. Really appreciate it. So thanks everybody, and have a
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.